Hi everyone, it's Nancy at Sipping and Painting Hamden, and today we're going to paint this beautiful painting called Moonlight. And basically, we have a 16 by 20 canvas, and I'm using really basic colors today, using black, blue, white, red, and yellow. That's it. And I have my water jar. I have my napkins. I'm going to use 3 brushes today. I'm going to use a large flat, a medium flat, and a small round. Got my trusty old Bob Ross mug that I got from bobross.com. A little bit of coffee in it. We are Sipping and Painting Hamden. We don't always drink wine, although we like to drink wine. Sometimes we have coffee too, so. Shall we get started? Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my large flat brush. I'm going to put it in the water, and I'm going to just paint the canvas with some water. So those of you who are afraid of painting, who say, oh my goodness, I haven't painted since the 1st grade, great, this step will be easy, and you're all going to get an A, okay? I'm going to give you all an A on that. All right, so that's awesome. Now, you'll see in this painting that the background is gray and blue and white streaks. So that's exactly what we're going to do. You can start with just white, or you can start with black on top of the white, or you can put one color on one side and one on the other, and then pick up blue. It doesn't really matter. So long as you have black and white and blue stripes. So I'm going to pick up blue on one side of my brush. I'm going to pick up white on the other side of my brush. And then I'm going to go back and forth. And I already put on a few black and white ones. Now, I want to keep adding white because blue and black are pretty dark. And I'm going to need to cancel that out a little bit so it's not too dark with some white. I'm also going to keep dipping my brush in the water when I need more moisture, because what I'm looking at is a lot of texture in my canvas, and what that's telling me is that it's pretty dry. Depending on where you're painting, it will determine the moisture in the air and the humidity on the canvas. So let's say, for example, you're painting in Puyallup, Washington, where one of our studio friends is, Mrs. Lamb. Hello, Mrs. Lamb. I think it's wetter there, right? So you would want to put on a little more water, mix in some water with your paint. Or pardon me, the other way around. In Denver, we mix a little water with our paint. In Washington or Oregon or Louisiana or even Michigan, some of the places that are more humid, especially in the summer, you want to not add water. So it just depends. You'll get a feel for it. It should feel like you're painting with Hershey syrup, not vanilla pudding. Okay, so if it feels like pudding, then it's too dry. If it feels like Hershey syrup, then it's just right. I don't know what else to describe as like Hershey syrup. I guess like any kind of syrup, like maple syrup or cough syrup. If it needs to be thin, but thicker than water, right? If it's too thick, if it's more like pudding or ketchup, then you need to add some water. So it just depends on where you are. Acrylic paint dries very quickly, very quickly. And in Denver, it is super dry, especially in the summer. Right now it's July. It's super, super dry in July. And so I want to just add enough water to keep it flowing across my canvas and not get these little canvas marks. Can you see those? All right, so I'm noticing that this is pretty light down here, and in my original it's darker. So I'm gonna just streak in some more black and more blue. Here's the thing, you want those streaks. You don't want to blend everything away. And what I noticed, I'm also a Bob Ross teacher, And what I noticed is that when people paint, there's certain people that when they paint with acrylics, they'll want to blend the dickens out of it. They want to get rid of all the texture and the streaks. And what I found in my Bob Ross classes is people who work in IT or in finance or in a job where they have to stay in tune with a ton of different details, they tend to be my cleaners. They're the ones who want to keep everything neat and clean, which is great, right? They're highly detailed people. They want to keep things organized, and that's terrific. But when they paint, oh, I'm splattering. Happy accidents. Don't worry about a thing, right? It's painting, not surgery. No one's going to die if we make a little splatter. Anyway, so for folks who are in highly detailed occupations, they tend to keep blending until it's all one color. I think because they're looking for consistency, and that's how the brain is wired. So I have to ask you, if you're one of those people, if you're a neatnik, or if you're someone who's highly organized, like an engineer or a finance person, I need you to pull back on your brush a bit, okay? And relax, maybe have that glass of wine. I find a glass of wine really does the trick to help me relax. It's not always appropriate, not everyone can drink wine, but if a nice glass of wine helps you, then by all means, whatever it takes for you to relax. The other thing we recommend here at Sipping and Painting Hamden is we recommend that you listen to music. Now, we are not playing music as I paint today. I'm gonna not be that far out because when I record these and then post them on YouTube, YouTube doesn't want to deal with copyright violations. So we discovered it's just easier not to play music. But when you're in the studio here, we play music and we have a good time. It is sipping and painting, but you know, our customers have been great. We really haven't had any problems with the sipping part. People, you just usually have a glass or two of wine and while they're here just to relax and not be so self-conscious, really. And of course, we know that most of the people who come in here are beginners, and we will cheer you on and tell you how brilliant you are no matter what your painting looks like. At least we're supposed to. I would say that our customers would say, yes, we do that well. All right, so I'm just adding these streaks. There's blue, there's black, there's white, and then every so often I go back in for my water. And notice how I'm going all the way across. And the reason I'm going all the way across is that way I don't get those short little stubby streaks. I want long horizontal streaks. This is a very straight horizontal streaky painting, and that's going to contrast nicely with our very round, very bright moon. So we have long, drab, kind of gray streaks, and then we're going to have this bright, vibrant white moon, and it's going to provide just the contrast we need. All right, so I've got grays and blues in there, and this painting even has the tiniest amount of brown. Now, we don't have to put in brown. We could just take a tiny bit, just the ever so slightly, just the tiniest amount of red. And I'm actually going to put some of that down at the bottom here. See that? There's some streaked in down here, some red in the ground. And if my brush is still a little bit wet from the red, then I can take that dirtiness in my brush and I could streak it in a little higher to create something similar to brown. All right, now I notice there's some yellow in there too. Took the tiniest amount. This is just, I would say about 2 ladybugs at the most. And I'm just gonna streak some of that in there too. And I want this to be random looking. I don't want straight lines. If you have straight lines like like you'd find in a men's shirt, then that's not what we want. We just want this to be very random looking. And by having blue and red and yellow, it will make a brown all by itself. And maybe a little bit of black in there too. And you can see that all of that together is starting to make a little bit of brown. All right, and I can take that dirt on my brush and just put in a few streaks here and there to put in that brown. All right, so remember how we made it? It was just the tiniest amount of red, just the tiniest amount on my brush. And I just streaked it back and forth in that dirt, right? And when I mean dirt, I mean the base, the ground, where that tree is going to grow. And then the tiniest amount of the blue as well. Streak that in there and let them all just make friends and play together. They don't have to be separate. We don't want them to be separate, but we also don't want to blend them all in either. We just want all those colors to dance and play nice and not really worry too much about exactly where the line of the ground is. It kind of fades off. And then we had yellow streaks, we had blue streaks, and a little bit of black in there. Some black paints have blue pigment in them, and you'll see that sometimes when they're mixing. And so then I have this nice dirty brush. So if I just put a drop or two of water on it, but don't clean it entirely, when I streak in my in my brown, it's just going to make just dirty it up a bit. That's what I want. I just want the sky to be a little bit darker. Now I'm noticing up here it's much grayer, and so I'm going to add a little bit of water, a little tiny bit of black paint, just the tiniest amount on my brush. And then I'm going to streak in a little bit more black. I'll go back and forth all the way, but just want it to be a little bit darker so it's more similar to my sample painting. And I'm just relaxing and enjoying it. And anytime I feel like the canvas is fighting me a little bit, that means it's dried out and I need to pick up a drop or two of water, and that will make things feel a little more smooth. You can mix any colors out of the colors I have on my palette. If you have a primary yellow, or just a regular yellow, and you have a red and a blue and a black and a white, you can make any color under the sun. Did you know that? Just your three primary colors and black and white. It's going to take a little while to mix them and get the feel for them, but you can make any color you want, which is pretty fun. There's not a whole lot in life where you get to have so much control and be so powerful. But in painting, that reminds me of something Bob Ross used to say. He used to say, you get to be the god of your world when you paint. Can't do that a whole lot of other places in life, and probably shouldn't either. But in painting, you get to create. You get to be the creator. For an hour or two, however long your little painting session is, it's your time. You get to create whatever you want. Only your imagination will only be limited by what you say it is. So we have a mix of colors down here, same here. We have this blue and gray and brownish background. Now mine's a little bit more vibrant than this one. I could keep adding a tiny bit of black or the other colors mixed together to make brown if I wanted. I kind of like mine being a little bit more vibrant. That's really your call. One thing that I noticed about painting is that everyone has a different style when they paint. Their paintings frequently turn out pastel. We have a teacher here, Thea. She's fabulous. She's amazing. She's an art school grad. She was painting since she was about 5 years old. She's just brilliant. But she has a very different style than I do. She's neat and very highly skilled and technical in her painting. And she likes pastels. She does a lot of pastels. Me, I didn't have any training. I just like to plot paint on there and have fun with it. And neither way is wrong. Neither way is wrong. It's just who you are, and you'll find out your interest and your skills and your style by painting. You just keep painting, and as you keep painting, you'll learn to discover your own style. Notice how I'm holding, when I'm doing these streaks, I'm holding the brush so that the flat part is flat like a table. Imagine a little guy sitting on your brush, and if you tilt your brush, it's going to fall right off, right? So that's how I remember. And that gives me the thin strokes. When I hold my brush, you know, flat, I get those thin strokes. If I turn it around, I'm going to get real fat strokes, and I just want this to be real thin. I want it to look like wispy clouds on a faraway dusk horizon, okay? And in order to get that effect, I need to hold my brush flat. All right, so I'm gonna let that dry just a little bit, although I do need to perk up the bottom. I see this has quite a bit of red and a little bit of yellow in it, and I don't really have that. So I'm gonna put a little more red in the bottom of mine, kind of perk it up a bit. And I'm going to blend it, but not too much. Remember, not too much. All right, that's pretty similar now. Okay, good. So I'm going to put my brush in the water. I always wash my brushes really well in the water. Lots of swishing back and forth so there's no surprises when I go to paint with it later. And then tap, 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 and then I wipe it on the napkin, and the napkin will tell me if I did a good job cleaning. I did. Okay. I'm going to sip my coffee, and just in a moment, we're going to paint that great big beautiful moon. In fact, I'm going to let this sit for a minute, and this is a good time for you to go and get a paper plate. All right, that's what I'm going to go do, a clean paper plate. We're going to use a paper plate for our moon. All right, ready, go. All right, I found my plate. I'll give you a minute in case you haven't found yours. I noticed there's a little bit of light down in here. It must be the reflection of that moon somewhere in here. Just makes those colors a little lighter. It's not, I'm not going to leave it white, but just blend it in a little bit so it has a little bit of lightness below the moon. Just back and forth while you're getting your paper plate. All right. I'm making sure that those lines are very, very straight. Okay, so now I'm going to take my paper plate and I'm going to find where that is. Now, my painting is still a little wet. It's probably not a good idea for me to start painting white on top of a wet painting. I'm one of those impulsive people. I would sit on wet paint probably. If I saw a park bench that was wet, I'd probably sit on it and tell myself, oh, it's not that wet. But if your paint is still wet, remember I told you acrylic paint dries very quickly in dry climates. Sometimes my paintings dry in about 5 minutes in Denver, but more likely about 10 minutes. If you're in a humid place, it might take a half hour. And it depends on how thick you put it on as well. So you can fan it like this. I can put my painting in front of a fan That's another way. Or I could use a blow dryer. And then the fourth way, now here's another way. You can move it around like this. And in my classes, I like to have people jumping around, waving their paintings around, doing a little dance to the music. And not only does that work really, really well to dry your painting, it's also fun. It gives you a little exercise, it's fun, feels like dancing. Then the very last way to tell if it's wet is, a way to see if it's still wet, rather. If you look to the side and it's still shiny, that means it's still wet. Or you can pick it up and wipe it on the person next to you, and if they scream at you, it was still wet. I don't recommend that second way. I just like to look and see if it's shiny. And mine looks pretty good right now, so I'm going to call it done. Now, I'm not going to put my moon directly in the center, and the reason for that is when you're painting anything in nature, you want to make it not perfectly symmetrical, okay? You want to put it a little off center. If you're painting a horizon, you want to have the horizon a little lower than halfway or a little higher. You don't want things to be perfectly symmetrical because your eye doesn't know where to look then, because it's competing. Both sides compete, or both up and down halves compete. So I'm going to put mine a little bit off center to the left. Just a little bit. And I'm going to put it down about 1.5 inches here. Right about there should be good. And then I'm going to, you can use your small brush or your large brush, it makes no difference. I would recommend probably the small brush. I just started with a bigger brush and I'm going to stop that. I'm going to use my small brush. That was not enough control for my purposes, so I'm going to use my small brush. And I'm going to trace around my paper plate with one hand while I'm holding it still with the other. Now, this is going to take a little bit of coordination and not be perfect. I really try not to obsess about perfection. If my moon isn't perfect, if anything in my painting is not perfect, I don't really care. What I've learned is that I can enjoy the process or I can obsess. And it's a whole more fun to enjoy the process. So now I'm going to take my medium brush and I'm just going to fill that in. Whoop. And you can start in the middle and then swoop out if you want. Helps to say, it's very peaceful, very zen-like. But you can fill it in any way you like. You don't have to do it my way, do it your way. You're painting. Now here's where you don't have to be a perfectionist about the blending at all. Because we're going to put texture and we're going to mess up the moon a little bit on the inside. So it looks like it has creases and valleys. You want to be careful just with the outline on the outside. Go real slow and careful around the outside so that you can keep a circle. If you mess it up, go put your plate back on and then go around it again. But on the inside, I really don't care what it looks like because I'm going to deliberately mess that up anyway with lots of different strokes going lots of different directions. And the reason I want to do that is because I don't want this moon to look like a baseball or a volleyball, or I want it to look like a moon. And moons have pocks. They have hills and valleys and craters and I don't know what. I've never been to the moon, but all kinds of marks in it. So I'm going to deliberately mark it up. I'm going to mix the tiniest amount of black, just the tiniest amount with the tiniest amount of white and create a gray, a light gray, not a charcoal, but a light gray. And then I'm going to just come in and put in marks and craters. And you can put them in any shape you want, but I'm going to concentrate on the right side in a crescent shape because that's where my shadow is going to be. So this side of the moon, is going to be more in shadow than the other side. And so when you're painting a moon with shadow in it, you do it in a crescent shape. And it doesn't really matter the shape, the marks that you're doing. See how I'm just blotching, and first I was doing little curves, and now you could do figure eights, you could do X's and O's, you could just tap. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you mix it up, that it's not all the same little mark, that each mark is a little bit different than the other, okay? Nice, it's coming along nicely. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do a little bit more of that. Some areas are real dark, some not so much. I'm just going to put a little bit more of a crescent shape into it. I'm going to have this area really pop, being lighter. Another way you can do it that's kind of fun, if you're painting with kids, they will like this part. Let me show you. You can just put the paint on your finger and then make pock marks, or your thumb. Make craters, moon craters with your finger or your thumb. It's a little messier. Oh, it feels fun though. It's very fun. Feels good. It's like taking off your shoes and walking through the grass in the summer. Just feels nice in your finger. So if you want to do that instead, by all means, that is fun. And where else do you get to finger paint? All right, so far so good. We're doing good. Now I'm going to pick up more white, and I'm just gonna smooth out some of it, maybe over here. A little more bright white over there. Just kind of give it the appearance of roundness by the strokes that don't have craters so much, that it's got some roundness to it. But not all over, just in part of the moon. I don't want an abrupt start and stop from that. I just want it to look more highlighted on the bright side. Just putting a little bit more light in. And then break it up where they meet so it's not so obvious. And it should still have some puck marks. It should just be a little brighter than the other side. Is it looking like a moon yet? What I like to do is I like to step back about 10 feet and then take a look at it. And if it looks like a moon from 10 feet away, then I'll be pretty happy. Now I'm going to let this dry for a minute. Just a little bit. And if yours looks too pokey, if you have peaks and valleys that are just too much, if you step back 10 feet and it's just too much, you can very softly, without really touching your canvas, just with 2 hairs and some air. That's what Bob Ross used to say, 2 hairs and some air. You can pop down any little piles you have or any little clumps, just real softly by barely touching your canvas, just to get any clumps out, if those pops were a little too much. And then I'll have to dry a little faster too. I still want the craters. But if they're too much, if you got big piles and big craters, it's okay to just softly touch them and tap them down a bit. But again, look at it from 10 feet away. No one's going to put their nose in your painting just like you are right now. People don't tend to do that when they come visit. they'll look at it from across the room and say, oh my, who's the painter? That's beautiful. They're not going to put their nose in it 2 feet away or 2 inches away like you're painting this. All right, so I'm pretty happy. I'm going to let that dry. And then I can start working on my trees pretty quick. And again, little reflections of white, but I'm barely touching my canvas when I do this. It's barely touching it. 2 hairs and some air. It's like putting aloe vera on a very light. And then clean my brush and just sweeping that out even more. And those are just little highlights on the ground below in the moon. All right, nice. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to have a swig of my coffee, and then, excuse me, yeah, we're going to make some happy trees after this. Again, I'm a Bob Ross teacher, so I tend to use his language, but this is not a Bob Ross painting. This is an acrylic painting. Bob Ross painted in oils, and I am going to do some Bob Ross classes on YouTube and Zoom pretty soon. Those are totally separate, though. Those take a lot longer, completely different supplies. We use all Bob Ross supplies when we do those classes. And so I hope you'll watch for those and then join me, because those are going to be a lot of fun. So I'm thinking that I might just add a little bit more white, oops, in this general area, because I want it to have roundness. 2 hairs and some air, so soft, so soft, so soft. So soft. I'm stealing Bob's expression because it's a good one. 2 hairs and some air, I like it. But I just want this soft, that's the point, soft, soft. Basically like a feather, just tickling it with a feather, like a feather. Just want a little bit more white in a circular thing. I just want to have a little bit of suggestion that this is round. But it's all kinds of pock marks in it too. All right, so you ready to make some trees? Let's make some trees, okay? All right, let me teach you about trees. So here's the thing about trees. Notice that in this tree, the base is wider than the top of the tree. So you always want the base of your trees to be wider, and you want it to get thinner as you go up. And the way you do that is, there's some black paint on my medium brush covering up that drip from before. You start at the bottom. You always start at the bottom when you paint your tree trunks, and that deposits more paint at the bottom. So I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to press good and hard at the bottom, and then I'm going to be a lighter touch as I go up. Now, notice that my trunk is not straight. Good, good. I don't want a straight trunk. Do not make a straight trunk. You want nice wide at the bottom. Twist your brush as you go up and follow through to the top. And that's going to give you a wide trunk at the bottom. It's going to give you a narrower trunk at the top, which is exactly how they grow. And it's going to give you something that's not straight, because there aren't straight trees. If you go out and look at trees in your yard or in a park, you'll notice the trees aren't perfectly straight. They're not supposed to be. So then when you make branches, a tree's branches grow out from one side first. Ooh, look, notice how I started in the trunk, went up and out. And that makes it wider where it touches the trunk and narrower at the ends. And that's what I want. It's just like your arm. Your arm is wider at the shoulder, narrower at the wrist. So I start in the trunk, and then here I'm going to go out from the other side. Now the reason I didn't just come out like a Y is that that's not how they grow. That's how we draw snowmen, right? But it's really not how branches and trunks grow. A tree will grow, notice the curve, a tree will grow a trunk, and then it'll have a branch. They'll grow some more, they'll have another branch. They'll grow some more, another branch. They won't always be on opposite sides like that. You might have two, one like that, but they don't grow from both sides at the same time, usually. Now I say that because there are probably 10,000 different species of trees. And if I say it always happens and someone's going to show me some tree from Madagascar or someplace that I don't know anything about trees, and then they're going to say, see, I found one. But in general, wider at the bottom, one branch, go up a little bit more, another branch, go up a little bit more, another branch, go up, you know, and have them alternate sides, or at least some on some sides and some on the other. Now, how do you paint the branches off of branches? So we have trunk, we have branch, and now we're going to have twigs. And I always start in the trunk, through the branch, and then out the twig. Start in the trunk, go up through the branch, and pull out the twig. Just like if the plant was drinking water, it comes through the trunk, goes through the branch, and the twig comes right out of that branch. And from here, if you want, you could switch to your small brush. It's going to give you finer lines. But the other thing that I'm doing is I am lightening up on my touch. As I go out, I'm making a lighter touch to get those finer lines, okay? So I'm going to switch to my small brush so that I can do smaller branches. I'm chiseling this paint. I put my small brush on the plate and I'm chiseling it on the side of the plate so I can get smaller branches. Always come out from the bigger branch and then do your twig. Always come out from the bigger branch, do your twig. And a fun little trick or a hack is if you come out from the branch and then you twist your brush, it will automatically curve. Trees before I knew to make them bumpy and curvy, and they were straight and they just didn't look natural. But if you twist your brush, they're going to look more natural. That's kind of fun too. I'm going through the branch, oops, and pulling out. Nice. All right. So that's my first one, my first tree. I'm going to do another tree over here on this side. Notice that they're not going to be perfectly symmetrical because the moon is off center. I'm going to start at the bottom, hard push at the bottom, and then lighter and twist my brush as I go up. Next to it, hard push at the bottom, twist my brush as I go up. Oh, I'm going to make that trunk a little wider. Shoop. There you go, but it's still wider at the bottom, notice that? And then I can come through the trunk and put a branch. Come through the trunk, put a branch. Come through the trunk, put a branch. Come through the trunk, put a branch. That branch is kind of crazy. I'm going to make it go all the way. All right. Come through the trunk, another branch. Again, I'm still using my medium brush, but you're probably going to want to switch to that small brush before I do. I'm pretty used to making straight smaller lines with my medium brush by turning it, but that takes a while to get a grasp on that. So now I'm using my small brush, and that's going to give me a lot more control. And branches can cross branches. They would in real life, right? They're not all spread out in one flat dimension. They're all crisscrossing with each other. Oops. If you don't start in the trunk, you end up with something like that. See how it's fatter there than down here? It's because I didn't start in the trunk. But I can fix it by just making it wider at the base. And then this is just going to have to be a big old branch, that's all. Now another thing I can do is I can cover that with foliage, because nothing that you are painting is a mistake you have to live with. You just let it dry and paint over it. That's a great thing about acrylic paint, is it acts like correction fluid. You remember, if you're old enough, before the computers, we had typewriters, and there was this thing called correction fluid, and if you were typing a letter, you could always fix a mistake by painting on the white stuff. They call it whiteout. I called it whiteout. And you could do the same thing with white paint. If you make a tree like that, a branch that's low, always make sure that you make the bottom of it wide enough. There you go. All right, that's fun. That's fun. I'm going to show you a couple different, let's see if I have another brush. I'm going to show you how to make foliage with two different kinds of brushes. I just realized I can show you a fan brush too. So I'm going to let this dry for a few minutes because I'm fairly happy with my trees. I'm going to let it dry, and while it's drying, I'm going to run and get another brush. Remember I told you I had a small, round, a medium flat, and a large flat. It just occurred to me, I want to show you also how to do a fan brush. Do I have any fan brushes back there? No. I'll go run and get one. I'll be right back. You let your painting dry. Time to let the dog out or get a beverage, and I'll be right back. I have lots of shiny areas on my tree, so I know it's quite wet. So I'm not going to do anything crazy. Actually, I am noticing on this painting however, on the original, there is black underneath this foliage. This is an interesting painting because from a distance it looks like spring blossoms, but it also has some yellow in here. So in looking at this painting, I don't even know what the intent of the original artist was. Did they intend to have it spring blossoms, or did they intend with a little bit of yellow to suggest a more fanciful painting where you have to use your imagination? I don't really know. If you want to do it in just shadow, which is the black we're going to put on, and then red, and then pink and white, you'll have just blossoms. If you add a little bit of this yellow in there, it creates another look altogether. And you could even add a lot of yellow and make it a fall painting. That's up to you. But for now, I am just going to do what the original artist did. And I'm going to pick up I have a fan brush. Now, fan brush just looks like a rake. It's just a soft brush, but it's got this other shape, and I love fan brushes, and I want to show you about fan brushes. So I put some in the black paint, and then I'm going to chisel off the clumps. I don't want any clumps. I want paint on there, but I don't want clumps. And then to put on foliage, I'm just going to put a little bit of this black underneath. Notice how I'm twisting and turning my brush. You don't want it all in the same direction because fan brushes have a curve to them sometimes, and you don't want to have all smiley faces or all unhappy faces. You want to twist and turn your brush, and you also want to go out from the branch farther than the end of the branch. What we don't want is a lollipop. We want things to trail off. If it looks too tight, it looks fake. And you know, I've owned the studio for 5 years. I've seen plenty of lollipops, so I'm going to spare you that. Try not to make it lollipops, okay? So we're just going to put at the ends of all the branches, and sometimes in the middle too, we're going to put a few of these black pops of color. And sometimes where there's not even a branch, maybe I want to put one, you know, down here, and it's just the suggestion, maybe there's a branch that's so small I can't even see it. Do put some over the trunk. because there are going to be branches coming out from the center forward as well, obviously. And that's about it for that one. And then remember, come out, keep twisting your brush, get different angles, and come out away from your branches in clumps. Clumps look more realistic because trees tend to grow their foliage in clumps off of branches. And I can get quite a few pops off of one load of paint. Without having to reload. Ooh, that's a scary painting. Now, if I want to just keep it like that, I could keep it like that. That's kind of fun. That's like a dark Halloween-ish look. But we're going to add some brighter foliage as well. And again, make sure that you put some over the trunk so you know that there's branches not just going out side to side, but also coming out front to back. All right, now I'm going to let that dry. It's important to let that black dry. And I want to make sure I have enough off the sides. Anytime you are painting a landscape, if you put more dark on the sides and the top, and also on the bottom sides, and you can just streak in some dark, what that does when you make the corners and the sides and the top darker than your focal point, it brings your eye into the focal point because it creates contrast. I didn't have any paint on that brush anymore, just it's like all the dry brush. Oh, I guess there's a little bit, but it's mostly dry, and I just kind of held it to the side and just streaked in a little bit of darkness into the corner, and that's just creating some shadows in the corner, and it makes this more interesting down here because that's brighter. That's another thing you can do with fan brushes. It's great for blending, it's great for streaking, it's great for grasses too, and animal fur. Fan brushes are fabulous. I get excited about fan brushes. It's my favorite brush. All right. So if you're a beginning painter and you don't have a fan brush, you know what to ask for your birthday or for Christmas, right? All right. So I'm going to let this dry a bit, and then we're going to come in with some red, okay? But let it dry. This is important. I can take that plate I was using before, and I can do this. I'm going to be sure that you can see all the colors I'm going to be putting on. Excuse me. There's a fan right over my head in the studio here. We have a beautiful studio here. For those of you who live in Denver, we have classes 7 days a week. Because of the pandemic, sometimes we do cancel one here and there, but we are doing very, very careful social distancing. The tables, each seat is, the space between the table seats is 6 feet. And then we're also taking temperatures at the door. We're insisting everyone wears a mask when they're walking. They can take it off when they're sitting and painting, but they have to wear a mask when they come in. We have hand sanitizer throughout the studio. We're being very careful here, and we're only doing a handful of students at a time. So we used to be able to get about 50 people in here painting at the same time, and that was a lot of fun, tons of fun, especially Saturday night. It was crazy in here. But now, because of the pandemic, you know, we might get 2, maybe 4 people in here painting at once. And I tell you, I'm just loving these tiny classes. It's hard on the budget, but boy, it's fun because I get to give people lots of one-on-one, stand back 6 feet, I wear a mask, but it's great because we can really make sure that that everyone gets a lot of one-on-one. And the reason I started telling you about that is there's a fan directly above my head that circulates air through the studio. And unfortunately, it is also allergy season in Denver. So every time I step up here, that fan gets me. That's okay. There's no one in here right now, just me. And I am just making sure that this painting is drying, that it's going to be good and dry before I put on my red and white and possibly a little bit of yellow foliage. Again, you have to think about, do you want red and white to make it like cherry blossoms? Or do you want it to have some yellow, a little bit of yellow in it to make it a mystery season? Or do you want to put a lot of yellow in it and have the red and yellow overlap and mingle, and it'll create some orange in there. And then you'll have a fall painting. So you have to decide what you want. Another idea is you could do it all in green. I would add a little bit of whatever color you choose in the trees, streak a little bit more of that in down there. But at this point, if you did green leaves, you could have a summer painting. So you decide what season is this going to be in your world. I know what season it's going to be in my world. It's going to be just like the original, because I feel obligated to honor the original artist. But you don't have to do that. No one's going to see the original in your world. You paint whatever you want. So mine is dry enough. I'm going to, do you see that little dot of black? See how little that is? If your red is a lighter red, like a cherry red, you can pick up the size of a ladybug and stir it in. Oh my goodness, that went dark fast. Whew. Hopefully I don't regret that. Anyway, make it ever so slightly. Black is a powerful, powerful paint color, and you don't want to do it too quickly. Don't put in too much. Size of a ladybug or smaller, a lentil. And if you just put in the tiniest amount of black, you'll have more of a deeper red, like a lipstick red. Not quite burgundy, but if you have burgundy, that works too. But go easy, or else you'll have to start over. But I just wanted to just make that a little less bright cherry and a little more lipstick. Okay, now I have red on my brush, and it's the color I want. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Same exact thing. I'm going to twist and turn my brush. I'm going to let some of those black bunches go through. I'm not going to try to cover them all, because you need darkness to see the light, right? So those black pops are the shadows of these brighter pops. Those are farther away, so they're in the shadows, or they are the shadows. I'm not sure which. They could be both. But leave them. Don't cover them. You need those. You need the dark to see the light. A little bit of philosophy thrown in with your free art class. How's that? So I'm just popping all over. And notice how I'm twisting and turning that brush. Always twist and turn your fan brush, or else you'll get all happy faces or all sad faces, and everyone will say, oh, you used a fan brush, didn't you? Mix it up, let them guess. All right, nice. That popped, didn't it? Whew. And now over here, same thing. You want enough paint that it comes off easily. You don't have to give any pressure, but you don't want any big clumps or drips either. There's a middle ground we're looking for when we're applying our paint on our brush. That's fun. I'm enjoying this, are you? Now, if I wanted to add the yellow, I could just leave this red. Oh man, it is powerful in red. It's pretty in red, but this one has pink. So you have to decide, do you want it all red? Or do you want some pink in there? If we put in pink, we're also gonna put in some white, because blossoms have highlights in them too. So you decide, you gotta decide before we get to the next part. You wanna leave it, you wanna leave it red, you wanna add pink, you wanna add white, you wanna add yellow. Your world, your tree, you decide. I'm going to pick up some white right on my red brush. I'm just going to go to the side of my white, just like that. I'm going to scoop up, I didn't even clean my brush, I just scooped up some white. You know why I did that? Because when I pop this on, it's going to start to blend with, I'm putting the stark white, by the way, first near the moon, because I want that to be more white. But as I go, because my other paint was wet, now as I go in on the tree, all those red branches are contaminating the white on my brush and making pink. Yay, easy. I didn't have to blend pink. I just let it happen naturally. That is fun. See that? All right, now in order to do this tree, I'm going to need to clean my brush because I want to have that stark white again at the very beginning because it's going to be near the moon on this side. So again, I'm going to go right into my white, fix them up. And then I'm going to start the brightest areas by the moon. I think I forgot one over there. Extend that white out a little bit past your red near the moon, because the things that are sticking out the farthest toward the moon are going to have the most moonlight on them. That makes sense, right? And then as it gets farther in the dark areas, it's going to get darker, and it's going to be less white and more pink, more red mixing in. And if your black's a little bit wet, more black, maybe. If you still had any black in there. All right, so now over here, it's not quite as red. It's more, not quite as white, it's more pink. And if it's not, you can always pick up a little bit more red on your brush and put on some more pops of pink. Ooh, that's pretty. That is pretty. All right, now I tend to overdo foliage because I love it. I love it, it's so fun. Notice how mine has a ton more foliage than the original? I always do that. I don't know why. A friend of mine one time said, you can't even see the moon anymore, silly me. But one time my friends, there was this Facebook thing, and my friend said, it was a meme, it said, describe the person on this page with one word. And everybody said different words, and they're talking about me. And then my friend who's known me a long time said, abundance. And I thought, you know, that's funny. When I paint with abundance. I use a lot of paint. I like lots of flowers, lots of foliage, and boy, she nailed it. She did. All right, I think I'm pretty much done with this painting. I loved painting this. It was fun. You can tweak it all you want. And, you know, just, I tend to go a little crazy sometimes. Like I said, I'm into abundance, right? So I could tinker with this all day long, but just know that if you tinker, you might hate it. So a good rule of thumb is if you're 80% happy, leave it alone, okay? All right, I'm gonna leave it alone now. Boom, done. Oh, hey, you know what I forgot? You can also put yellow in your leaves if you want. You can put in yellow. There's a few pops of yellow in this painting, and since I have so much paint, I even hate to do that. So, I don't know. I think I'm going to because the original does, but I'll tell you, I don't know if I'm going to like it. But you can just see how a little bit of yellow, just a little bit of yellow, gives it a totally different dimension. Not sure why it's in there, but again, I'm honoring the intent of the original artist who had some yellow in there for whatever reason. My teachers at the studio, yeah, are the artists who work for me. And I learn all kinds of things by watching them and talking to them. And one time one of them said to me, you know, paintings don't have to make sense. The colors don't have to make sense. And that's good for me to hear because I'm more realistic, and when I paint Bob Ross, it's more realistic. And I tell myself sometimes, yeah, it doesn't have to make sense. If you want a purple tree, you can make a purple tree. If you want, you know, You decide. That's what I love about painting. You make your tree, your world exactly how you want it. I'm pretty happy with this. I'm happy enough. It's going to go on the sale table anyway, but I'm pretty happy with it. Again, I used a ton of foliage. You might want to lighten up a little bit and go with less so you can see your beautiful moon. I went a little crazy. I am a little crazy. I think my husband would probably agree with that. Anyway, I'm going to just use my smaller brush. I'm going to put my initial in the corner. You can use it in any color you want. And that's it. Thanks for painting this painting with me today. It's called Moonlight. And again, your painting is going to look different than mine. Mine looks way different than the sample, but that's the beauty. We get to see your personality come through in your painting. And that's, to me, the most wonderful part about painting. I absolutely love that. And I would love to see a picture of your painting. So you can email us at Hampden Sip and Paint, HAMPDEN, SIP, SIP, letter N, paint @gmail.com. Send me your pictures. I want to see your paintings. Or you can go to our website and contact us that way. It's www.sipping, in the letter N, paintinghamden.com. And we'd love for you to visit us in Denver. So until the next time, thanks so much for painting with me. Ciao.